Good afternoon, Vikings fans. This is Morning Joe's. I'm your host, Joe Johnson, owner of PurplePTSD.com and VikingsTerritory.com. We're having some technical difficulties per usual. I'll call it Mr. Joe Oberly back. We are attempting to live stream across multiple platforms, video style, while we do this, so bear with us, especially if you're on the audio version. But Joe isn't online, and that's always good. He'll join. Let's just get through this while we can. I will pull up a video stream of my amazing face. But yeah, it's been a great week. The Vikings had their first game of the season on Sunday against the Atlanta Falcons. It was kind of a litmus test, I think, for both teams. You know, both teams had high expectations last year, dealt with some injuries, and especially, the Falcons on defense dealt with some injuries that plagued them. They both ended up around 500, made some off-season moves, both to bolster up their offensive line, and so it was really a good test to see where these teams were. Some of us that cover the Vikings for a quote-unquote living we're cautiously optimistic coming into this game. I definitely was. I know that the third preseason game, which is always referred to as the dress rehearsal, was a letdown for the Vikings. As Kirk Cousins, I think, was 3 of 13. It looked awful, and there was a lot of reasons for that, justifications and or excuses. All right, we're calling Joe again. And, it's really, looking at it now...
Joe!
You're back!
Joe!
What's up?
Yeah.
So, I did our introduction.
Are we on?
Yeah, we are. I've been rambling to myself a little bit here. It's quality entertainment. I wonder why isn't my disgusting face getting larger? Let's see here. Well, it's constantly expanding, but let's see. Well, let's just go with audio, and people that are watching can just listen to it, because it doesn't really matter. They saw what they needed to see, which is the amazingness of my background that I've put tons and tons of money into. But I was basically just talking about how the game went, and
these kind of starts to the show are I got to do this to you once a season, just to keep you on your toes. You know that, don't you?
It makes up for me on not recording any of your audio a couple weeks ago. We're good
That's
at
true.
We're good at what we do. Is the major point. But yeah, I was just kind of easing into the show. I introduced you, and was talking about how the game on Sunday was kind of branded as a litmus test for both teams, coming off of a around 500 season, and not really knowing where either of these teams stacked up. And I think it's hard for me just initially to say, like, with full confidence how I feel about how the Vikings performed, just because we didn't see a lot from the passing offense. I mean, there's been a lot of statistics about how long it's been since a team has thrown 10 times and won a game, so on and so forth. I think the stat was like 1977 or something like that. And,
I was thinking 100 years back. The Vikings were just trying to celebrate 100 years of the league. So.
And I think Kyle Rudolph made a similar joke after the game. Cousins talked about how unique it was. I know Zimmer would take that every day of the week. Clearly, he'd take a win any day of the week, but a game in which he's actually got some balance and success from the run game, something that he clearly wanted badly last season. I think this game went out as well as Zimmer could have hoped outside of those defensive penalties.
Yeah, it was a really good performance. I now, when I look back at it, I mean, at the time, I called it purple dominance because they did dominate him. Now, it certainly is helpful when the Falcons are going to gift you 3 turnovers and a block punt, so that's always nice to have. But when I look back on it now, I wonder just how bad the Falcons were as opposed to how good I think the Vikings were. They looked great. They looked very good, in every phase of the game. Special teams were rocking. The defense was, lights out from the word go. I mean, Anthony Barr with two out of the 3 tackles in the first series, and Everson Griffin with a couple sacks. I think one of them was called back on a penalty. The team the defense never let Atlanta get their offense in a rhythm. They were supposed to be a better offense. And they held Julio Jones down again. The Vikings offense, was just what we thought it was going to be, because it's what Zimmer has been preaching about for a year and a half now, is he wants a run game, and that eats up the clock in the second half with the lead. And he couldn't have scripted it any better. It's just what he would have wanted. Now, I don't think you'll ever see 10 passes in a game again. I'm sure you won't see that next weekend when they go up to Green Bay. But it was wonderful to watch, as boring as it was in the second half. I mean, the game was virtually over at halftime, 21-0 with the Vikings getting the ball in the second half. I mean, my goodness, I'm very heartened by what I saw, but I guess it's a long way of saying, as I've come away from it, I'm starting to think, that maybe the Falcons aren't as good as we thought they were. So the
Definitely.
Vikings better temper their excitement just a little bit. But hey, we got to see something that was a lot of fun, and so I'm going to enjoy it.
It felt different, but similar to the first game of Stefanski's promotion last season, where they ran all over the Dolphins, and we felt like, they could have done that all season if DeFilippo wasn't for some reason going crazy, and then it didn't really end up being that way.
That's a good point. But we knew the Dolphins were bad.
Yeah, and it's just hard to say where the Falcons are. I mean, they were supposedly healthier on defense than they were last season. They brought in those offensive linemen to help keep Matt Ryan on his feet. And, I mean, a lot of it, too, and I know you're not diminishing it, you're just doing what I'm doing, which is it's a coping mechanism I think all Vikings fans have, as we get this euphoria after a big win, and then we start to pick it apart and say, well, that's not going to continue. We wake up screaming in the middle of the night.
Well, as I said in the post-game story I wrote, and I've been kind of feeling it, I think after a preseason of just ho-humness and off and on concern, we finally saw the team that some of these national prognosticators have been talking about. They got a pretty good team. They got a pretty good team up there. You heard them say that this weekend after the game. They got a pretty good team. Jimmy Johnson thought Vikings got all the people in place, and people have picked up for the Super Bowl. And I had not seen that, So maybe this was the first time I said, okay, all right. I'm not going that far, but I'm saying they got a pretty good team.
Yeah, I saw an article. I didn't read it, but I saw the headline, which is I'm doing exactly what I'm going to complain about later in the show. But the headline was the Vikings are the dark horse in the NFC, which is very true. I mean, I do feel like, and we've talked about this a million times, and I know I'm not getting into power rankings. I explained to my girlfriend earlier today why you hate power rankings, and I completely understand why. I have like a weird thing about them. I've always had a chip on my shoulder my entire life, literally and figuratively. That's part of the reason I went to the doctor today. But I
don't hate them. I don't hate them. They're just meaningless. But
totally, completely subjective. I always look at them as okay, the Vikings never get any credit when they're actually good, so on and so forth. But I do see people turning around in that regard, but it shouldn't be that big of a surprise. I mean, last year was a letdown for a few different reasons that I do think were question marks. We didn't know if they'd be corrected, but obviously the offensive line being a big part of it. And we'll get into that. We'll go through some quick news. But yeah, the line looked amazing, especially in the run game, and it was extremely heartening. Delvin Cook, I think, like you said, and everyone's saying it's kind of an adage, but it takes a year to bounce back from an ACL, and he looks like a complete. Not to say that he didn't look good before his hammy, but he looks wow. He looks like he's back at Florida State. But the news of the week is obviously there was a lot of concern about Mackenzie Alexander's elbow. On top of that, Xavier Rhodes seemingly left the game at least twice. To go to the locker room or to miss a play, and all indications are that he's okay, but that's something to keep. I don't know, that concerns me greatly. There was this big article, and I have it right by my other computer, about how he was focusing on his health. I talked about this last week, so I don't want to be too repetitive, but like the way he's exercising is different. He's doing more Pilates, and he had 4 pretty severe nagging injuries last season: his back, his butt, hamstring, calf, and I don't know if that's just who Xavier Rhodes is now. We saw a lot of it last season, and
Zimmer would say so.
Yeah. And you don't want to say that's like, because I know Zimmer said something about him playing up to his contract and everything. And he is very highly paid. He's a top 3 corner in the league in terms of salary, if I recall correctly. Top 5 for sure. But yeah, I'm a little disconcerted about that. Mackenzie Alexander is not going to need surgery. It was a dislocated elbow. He's going to be out 2 to 3 weeks. But that depth at corner is going to be something to watch, especially with Rhodes missing plays and not being 100% ever.
That's some bad news it's good news, but it's bad news. It's bad news he got hurt. He looked like he was in a lot of pain, Mackenzie Alexander, on Sunday, and you feared the worst. No surgery is going to be needed, but the timetable's not been set yet. He's going to be out a few weeks, and the other guy's going to have to step up quickly. It's good to see how Jaron Kearse played in his stead in the slot position, so that was nice to see. I think they're going to have to now hustle back Mike Hughes quicker than maybe they might have. Mike Hughes.
And that's the word, right? He's going to be active for week 2. I saw.
I hadn't heard it yet, but that's good. He wasn't active for week 1, and they always want to be careful. But now they probably got to get him on the roster. I don't know that he'll start anywhere, and we don't know how much action we'll see. But hopefully they break him in slowly. And they could probably do that. They can have him. He and Jaron are different body types. They're different styles of defense, different. You can put him on, Jaron with the bigger guys when you want, to create a mismatch or prevent one, and Mike Hughes on somebody else. So it'll be interesting to see how they use those two. But I'm excited about Kearse and what he brings to the defense, and hopefully Alexander's back darn quick.
Yeah, Kearse had a great preseason. He was really beasting. There was a lot of conversations about him versus Mike Harris, and I joked during the live chat during the game on Sunday that Harris really had a statement game in that regard. That might have been one of the best individual performances from a safety in Vikings history in a single game. 2 interceptions, a fumble recovery. He is a ball hawk. He showed that last season. He's really coming to play and solidifying that spot.
Yeah, it's interesting to see when you get a guy that plays enough time in Zimmer's system and gets used to it and gets comfortable in it, how he can make plays. He can then marry his own particular talents with the system and be in the position to where he needs to be, and then just start balling, as they say. He made a great play in the end zone where he made that pick when the receiver cut off his route a little bit, and Harris just kept going and made a great catch. It was, look at what Harrison Smith has done at a safety in Zimmer's system. He's been on it for years and knows how to do it and has studied it and is a great proponent of it. So it's very exciting to see Harris playing this way, and I think it has a lot to do with just being that much more comfortable in the system.
Yeah, and that's always been kind of one of the drawbacks, supposed drawbacks of Zimmer's system, is that there weren't a lot of turnovers just based on how it functions, and it's more of a 3-and-out sort of stifling defense than a one that generates a lot of turnovers. So if they can keep that up. Obviously, I'm not breaking any news here to talk about how important winning the turnover battle is, and just seeing, like, especially with the atmosphere at home and having that punt block and then the interception. I mean, that momentum, any chance that Atlanta had seemingly died at that time. So it's just exciting. I mean, and as much as I didn't want to sound like I was kind of ripping on Rhodes, because he did, Arif Hassan sent out a tweet, I think today, because I saw it on Bleacher Report, that the target percentage in Sunday's game when Julio wasn't covered by Rhodes was 76.9%. When he was covered by Rhodes, it was 3.2%. The average yards that Julio ran on his routes when covered by Rhodes was 0 yards versus I think it was either 3.3 or 2.3. So he played. I mean, he did what was advertised. There's a lot of talk about Zimmer and Rhodes versus Julio, and Julio got that late garbage time touchdown to get his first touchdown against the Vikings since Zimmer started coaching here. But he had a great game too, even as hobbled as he was against a guy who might have been a little rusty holding out for that contract. I think that might have part to do with it. But yeah, just having the crowd in it. They weren't really in it last year in the opener with San Francisco. They're going to be tough to beat at home if they keep doing what they're doing.
I know. They've got to win at home. They've got to hold serve big time because they've got a tough road schedule. So that's important. It was great to see the crowd into it. And what more could you ask for? 3 and out and a block punt. Oh my God! Even I had to get excited about that. I come from the old days of the Purple People Eaters, and there was a lot of block punts back then. And there just haven't been that many. Last one we saw was like 2014 or 15 by Adam Thielen, and not many before that. So there's nothing that changes momentum and field position like a block punt. It's awesome.
Yeah, special teams did great. We'll talk about that in a little bit too. It was really a complete team game. I was a little surprised that they released Brett Jones earlier this week or last week to make room for Josh Doxson, who wasn't active for obvious reasons. They did bring him back, so that must have been part of it. The conversation is we'll bring him back when we can. I don't know why they did it that way, though. I don't know why they didn't just cut. So they ended up cutting Brandon Dillon, the tight end, and then Chase McLaughlin, the kicker that was on the practice squad, and maybe they saw enough in the game from Bailey with the extra points or something. I don't know, to feel comfortable making that move as opposed to doing it at the time. But
they did it after the Jets signed a new kicker and got rid of Vedvik so that they didn't scoop up the guy from the practice squad. So maybe that's the case. They waited to see what the Jets are going to do, and when they sign somebody else, and maybe they'll bring him back, the kicker, and just keep him around and say, hey, just stay by your phone. I certainly think that's what they did with Brett Jones. They just said, hey, listen, we're bringing you back as soon as we get the opportunity here, and we got some plans to do it. But they're just shuffling things around. They're so close to the cap. They probably got to make a lot of unique plays like that. Hey, it's kind of interesting, Joe. I don't know if the video's working out amongst the rest of the people, but I can see you.
Yeah.
On Skype here, and it's great because I can just see how bitter you get every time I interrupt you. So I'm going to do that the entire show.
Yeah, you might be. See, the video of me is very small on my screen, so I didn't think anyone could really, you could see my reactions. Ooh, you shouldn't have let that out of the bag. I'm just going to do this the rest of the time. Like I'm calling plays on the sidelines, cover my mouth. Yeah, and the offense, the Brett Jones thing, I think, I was surprised they didn't bring him in last season. I know he's more of a center than a guard, but the guards they had were terrible, and I always feel like he's kind of the forgotten guy. They cut him this offseason, bring him back, cut him again. But I think that shows that they have some semblance of comfort with the depth of this offensive line. And the first topic for the Vikings-Falcons game was obviously the run game, Dalvin Cook, so on and so forth. And starting we can talk about the offensive line a little bit. I guess most of the success that they had was off tackle and around the end, which was kind of obvious, especially on the right side, which is surprising. Brian O'Neill didn't play this preseason very much, and then you have a guy over there, another kind of forgotten guy, when especially in the Vikings writers world, in Josh Klein, who a lot of people thought was a placeholder for Drew Samia and kind of a mediocre veteran that has stayed healthy, so maybe that's why the Vikings wanted him.
And he said not so fast, didn't he, Joe?
Yeah,
Josh Klein.
Yeah, he looked,
everything I heard talked about him said he had a great game. I didn't pay that much attention to him, but it sounded like he played really well.
Yeah, the announcers, Spielman's brother, I mentioned him at least once, some of the things that he was doing. I didn't really notice this as much during the game because I was in this weird state of euphoria, but a lot of people were saying how great Kyle Rudolph did sealing off the edge. Granted, he did have that holding penalty on that first drive. There was a couple holding and or clipping penalties that pushed them back a couple times. That happened in the preseason as well. Word is that I've been hearing, and I'm not the best at this kind of stuff, but that's kind of one of the risks of running Kubiak and Dennison's system, is that there's a lot of that on the edge. So maybe it's something we just have to live with and then take it with like a grain of salt with all the success that they're having. But man, Cook, like I said, looked awesome. I think the average non-quarterback run per run was like 5.5 yards, which obviously will take. It's almost double what they were doing last season. Madison was 5.4 yards a carry, 9 for 49. Dalvin had 21 for 110. 2 touchdowns, which I'm sure you were happy with, since that was your number one running back in our fantasy draft. But yeah, we kind of talked about this already. It is really, really exciting to see, and if you can see this, that's me knocking. I took a wood desk over a metal one just so I could knock on wood whenever I talk about Dalvin Cook this season, because he looks great, and I want to see him obviously all 16 games.
You do, even with Alex Madison on all your teams?
He's my contingency plan, emotionally.
Okay. No, I'd love to see it. That was exciting as it gets for the Vikings. To see this guy that came in with so much promise a couple years ago and has done nothing but suffer through some devastating injuries, miss a lot of ball games. 15 in 2 seasons. It's like it's start with him, and he has bulked up in the off season. I think he's clearly healthy. He's jazzed. He wants to go. He's got a better line in front of him.
He runs a lot more physically. Like, he finishes runs in a way that I didn't remember as much. Lowering his shoulder.
I'd like him to stop that right now.
I was a little worried about it myself.
After hearing what I heard about Byron Buxton today, we don't need anybody who's had more than their share of injuries to go out and invite any. So, I don't know. I'm real excited for it. I'm nervous about it too, just because of the history. And with anybody on any team, an injury can happen at any time. So, that kind of excitement, that kind of burst, and when he's getting to the second level and doing stuff, and it just fires me up. I know Big Ten Conference, and he's not even from there, so I don't know. I was
going to bring up Amir Abdullah.
Oh,
that's so I grabbed my Big Ten basketball.
I'm just, it is so exciting to see a running game, and it's one game, it's small sample size, but as much as a receiver guy as I am, like you are, I hate it when it's all running and not a passing game, because I love the passing game. But damn, that was almost comical, in that they've only threw 10 passes, and that's all I didn't need.
Yeah.
When we were talking on Slack, during the game, we were talking with the chat, and someone was saying, "Oh, I'd love to see him pass." And I said, "Gosh, I don't think we'll see another pass the rest of the games. Then we're just going to wind that clock down with the running game." And that's just exactly what they did. So it was rare, unique for this team, and it was fun to see. Hope it continues.
Definitely. Some stats I pulled up for the show. Cousins last year never threw less than 21 attempts. He threw more than 40 times in 7 games, and he had 2 games early in the season where he threw the ball more than 50 times. DiFilippo, who had a 57.3% win percentage when he was here, threw the ball 67% of the time. In the 3 wins that Stefanski has had, he's thrown the ball 37.6% of the time. and he only threw the ball 22.4% of the time against the Falcons. The NFL average is 52.6.
Boy, when you hear those numbers, Joe, it really justifies what Zimmer's complaint was last year. But by the same token, it makes a Stefanski or Kubski or Stefaniak, whoever you want to call him, to just be nice little good soldiers that are falling right in line with what their head coach wants. Because she's like, look, coach, we only threw 5 times. You know?
Look, like some historic, like you said, the 100. It's like leather Duluth Eskimo level offense, and it's just it's probably not going to continue. I mean, we'll get into the Packers in a minute, but those were a couple games last season where Cousins arguably had his best games. The Rams game was pretty good too.
Baby. It's all about balance, and they'll have to reconfigure the balance for this game. There's no two ways about it.
You know, I've said this on this show. I say it a lot on my individual ranting show / evidence for 72-hour psychiatric hold. The smoke break that I've been doing on all of our platforms. You know, that I've been a big Cousins guy, but I've never thought he was like a Tom Brady or a Drew Brees. More that he had the ability to be perhaps an elite level systems guy. And I've been seeing a lot of stuff this week since the game of people saying that Zimmer is turning Cousins into a game manager. I think he is going to be a glorified game manager. I don't expect him to be Alex Smith level, but I mean that would be fine too if they win. That's all I really care about. But I do think that, you know, Cousins can only do so much, and a lot of people forget that he started out really well especially with his connection with Adam Thielen last season, and they just didn't have the run game or really the defense at that point to find a way to win consistently. You know, I remember we did a lot of shows at the beginning of last year, or maybe it was the year before, but the word was these aren't sustainable wins. And while the Falcons game really wasn't something you're going to expect, all those turnovers early, so on, and 10 passes, you could see what they're doing. I think it just worked very well on Sunday, but I don't necessarily think that that's going to be a huge outlier. I mean, it is statistically, but I think that balance is going to stay in some regard. I really think that that's what they're going for, and that's obviously why they lured Kubiak and Dennison out of retirement. You know, they wanted to implement the most brilliant mind available in regards to, you know, zone blocking and setting up that run game, and so far the evidence has been great.
Yeah, it's like I don't think I'd go that far to call that they're turning him into a game manager. I think they want to, exhibit, have him use all his best abilities to help the team win. And if some of that is, being accurate, finding, the open receiver, and hitting him, and then throwing a couple downfield to keep the defensive honest, it's fine. But as I said in my preview that I wrote before the show here, I'll give you a little preview of my preview, that the bottom line is if the now underpaid, I'm kidding, $84 million man can't manage that kind of workload, then guarantee him a ticket out of town at the end of next season. So, that was laughable in the numbers and passes that he was needed to throw. But he did a good job with what he needed to do, and it was stress free for him. He's had to have been smiling after the game, and it just, for me, we know that he can throw the ball because he had to throw the ball last year, and he did well under duress. And in fact, he had a couple good throws, on Sunday.
Yeah, that Thielen touchdown was gorgeous.
Yes, that were under duress. He got smacked a couple times, and he held on to it late to let his receiver come open. So I think you'll see more out of that.
So his touch passes were good too, and we were worried about that.
I think you'll see more out of him. Jesus. I think you'll see more of that out of him if he doesn't get smacked every time he has to go back for a pass. You know? Because he was doing it at the beginning of the season last year. By the end of the season, he was running for his life under that offensive line. So, I mean, a running game that is, the threat's always there, gives you the opportunity to pick your spots with your passing game. And and vice versa. They play off each other. It's so exciting to see.
Yeah, it definitely is. And one caveat is that the Falcons have been bad the last few years in the run game. I think they were 25th in the league last year. What Dan Quinn is known for, this like 8 in the box cover 3 situation that just for whatever reason, maybe they don't have the personnel. You think with 8 in the box they'd be okay against the run, but that just doesn't seem to be the case. The one thing with Cousins, though, is there was that late fumble that Bradbury picked up, and I know we joked a little bit about the fumbles and the ass sweat situation of Bradbury in the off season, but there was a couple miscommunication type exchange fumbles in the preseason too, so that's just something to keep an eye on, I guess. That's essentially what ended the Rams game last season. I think was an exchange fumble, obviously a different center, but it's a little disconcerting that there's been this many fumbles. That was really obviously the first full game that they played. I think it was the third one that I can remember. Maybe I'm just
new quarterback, new center. You're gonna have this stuff just so it isn't happening constantly. I'll take that if it wasn't a turnover. I'll take it. It's gonna happen. They're like you said, they played one series in the first game, played 2 series in the second, and then half a game in the third. So it's like, here we go. It's gonna happen.
Still getting some of that rust off. In terms of the defense, are you concerned at all about the third down penalties? I know Zimmer probably, he's never really happy and always looking to strive to perfection. And I think they had 3, maybe 4 third down, giving the Falcons first downs with neutral zone infractions or offsides penalties. And it wasn't solely just Everson Griffin, which that was kind of his calling card for a long time because he gets up the ball so damn fast. But yeah, but I think the other 2 were interior linemen, maybe. Maybe it was Danielle Hunter, but I remember at least one from the interior. They're still working on that stuff too, and Matt Ryan's good at what he does during the snap count as well.
I guess I would chalk it up to, and I did while watching the game, as an over-aggressive and amped-up team on their home opener. I think they'll clean that up. It's really dumb that they kept happening on third downs and giving first downs, so that's nothing good. But I'm not worried about it, to answer your question. You did ask me a question, Joe, so I figured I should answer.
Did I? I usually don't pay attention during the show. Yeah, I mean, with that though, they still only converted 25% of their third downs, which the Vikings would take every day of the week. This offseason we talked a little bit about Everson Griffin and hopefully him being able to bounce back from a down year for reasons that were reported on that were extremely unfortunate, and that's the kind of thing that I know a lot of people say, like, well, he's rich and famous. What does he have to be depressed about? It doesn't work that way. It's a biochemistry thing. And it can really lead to a weird sort of, as someone who's dealt with depression for a long time, like weird sort of apathy where things you used to have to be passionate about or really interested in, just you don't see the point of it. And when you're performing at a level that he was, that's a really dangerous combination. But by all intents and purposes, he looked great, I thought, Sunday, Everson Griffin. And it's if he can bounce back, that's really bad news for the rest of the NFL. With he got his sack, Danielle Hunter got his. Linville Joseph should be a little more healthy than he was last year, with all those shoulder injuries. The depth that they've worked on and had at the defensive line, they were very, very good, the entire unit on Sunday, I thought, and they really brought a lot of pressure to Matt Ryan, obviously, and I think that's something that's going to continue on Sunday and throughout the season.
I had said it last season. I said it at the beginning of this one, and I think I said it in opposition to a lot of people who were calling for the imminent demise of Everson Griffin. I said, no, he's got too much football left. He loves the game. He's just got to figure out what exactly is going on with him, get his meds right, get whatever else he's got to do to deal with it, and he will be back. And so I feel, just when you stand across a guy and and you see in his eyes, you just know how much he loves to play football. I couldn't see it ending up that way for him. I'm very encouraged by the fact that he did have that game. I hope it continues because I think he wants to be there. You saw how pumped up he was on the sidelines. He loves football, so it's I think it's a great thing for his mental health that he's back playing football, and I'm glad to see it.
Yeah, it's just, oh man, what a great game, honestly, and I mean, just all the statistics are amazing. The Vikings were 100% in the red zone in regards to scoring. Really quickly, touching on special teams as well. I know Zimmer praised Malou for his in-game communication. He called up that the rush that Eric Wilson had for the punt block. He spotted a weakness and he took advantage of it in a split second. That's extremely encouraging for a guy, because I know that a lot of the reason that Prefer was around for a really long time and they wanted him here this season as well was he was really good at that sort of thing, really good at kick coverages, not so much obviously in the kick and punting game, but his ability outside of that was elite, or at least from what I've read. And Maloof, a lot of the hype around him was his ability to get the most out of his kickers, not so much his punt and kick coverage. So seeing that was great. That block was amazing. Obviously, it helped just with momentum and everything else, field position. But it was good to see just the new punter. I thought looked great. There wasn't a lot of field goal opportunities, obviously, for Dan Bailey, but hitting all 4 of the extra points. It's just smooth, the stuff you want. We don't want to. I'm sick of leading the show with kicking news. Is my point.
Yeah, I thought the kick coverage, punt coverage was just okay. Nothing to write home about. They didn't have any kickoff return coverage to worry about too much because I think all 3 of the 4 went out of the end zone. So they could maybe work on that a little bit. Beebe didn't get to run any punts back. He was kind of bitter about it, you can tell. But the rest of it was spot on. I thought it was great to see. I hope that's a sign of things to come, and just keep. It sounded like great holds for the extra points, and so Bailey didn't have a problem. So I expect him to be hopefully moving back to his league leading average that he had all time as soon as possible.
And good on Beebe for coming through with that. That's kind of a weird thing to ask him to do, and he clearly came through. Holding for Bailey.
I thought it was the punter.
Oh, is he? I was all prepared for Beebe to do it.
No, he was doing it in the preseason, but as soon as is it Chilcutt or however you say his name?
Yeah, I always say Colquitt, but I don't think that's right.
I'm not sure what it is. And
I don't have any friends to talk Vikings with, so everything is just me reading alone. So I can never pronounce anything.
I think it was him who was doing the holding, and I think it's been seamless. It was obviously was seamless in the game. So.
Well, that's what not to get back into this whole thing, but that's what you look at when you bring a punter in, whether or not he can hold. You don't wait till afterwards. Mike Prefer. So the Vikings are facing the Packers on Sunday, and I wrote an article on purpleptsd.com. Initially, I just wanted to kind of look at, after week 1, where the NFC North was. And so the article kind of starts out that way. It's kind of a journey through how I got to this point. Something that I've been thinking about for a long time but haven't verbalized because it just sounds so stupid to most people. And I've seen that response a lot on Bleacher Report where I posted it. Granted, I think it's a lot of Packers fans responding because people are pissed. But namely that the original title I was going to go with the article was Aaron Rodgers isn't Aaron Rodgers anymore, with the second Aaron Rodgers being a quote, like the idea of Aaron Rodgers being, like Tom Brady said, this quarterback who could throw for 7,000 yards a season because he's so elite and so much better than Brady. So I used the comparison between him and Brady, which I understand is a very dense one, and there's a lot to it with Belichick, so on and so forth, and they've had a much better offensive line. But the idea generally was that, Rodgers was extremely successful and elite with a bad offensive line for a really long time. His 2 MVP seasons, the line was in the 20s. It's pretty much identical to what it's been the last 4 seasons. And it's just, in the last 50 games, Rodgers and the Packers are 25-24-1. In the stretch from 2009 to 2014 where he had the 2 MVPs in the Super Bowl. He surpassed QB rating of 162% of those games. Now he's out of the last 50 games, he's only surpassed 100 QB rating 20 times, which is 40%. They won 75% of the games when he went over 100 from 09 to 14, and now they are basically 500. And there's a little bit more to it than just statistics. There was a lot last season.
Hey, Joe.
Yeah.
Your cat is on the keyboard behind you, and I think he's typing out, "You're full of crap, Joe." I think he must be a Packer fan.
It wouldn't surprise me. Its mom is a Packers fan. It's tearing our relationship apart. There's a lot last season. The offensive line rankings are contingent on things like sack numbers, and there was a lot of reports last season of Rodgers holding onto the ball too long, throwing off his back foot, which is probably because he's under pressure. Then you watch the game, the Bears game, and I understand that he sat out the entire preseason, which seems odd when he's implementing this huge new offense, the first complete overhaul of his career. And he was saying things like, "I missed throws," and I told the coach I'll be a lot better than that. He just looked off on Thursday night. I mean, there was throws that you'd expect him to make in his sleep that he just wasn't. And so, I saw a lot of articles out there too, like for the Packers to succeed, Aaron Rodgers needs to be the Aaron Rodgers of old again, and a lot of that blame goes to McCarthy and Ted Thompson for this non-free agency decision, which makes no sense. But at the same time, I just don't think he's playing at that level anymore. At least he hasn't in the last few seasons, and there's a lot more to it than that. But after just seeing the Packers on Thursday night, their defense, I guess, played well. Those defensive ends they got were in Trubisky's face, but Trubisky's not that great either. He looked bad. So I just really feel like the Packers aren't this elite team that everyone has been hyping them up this offseason. The new look Packers are going to be, some power rankings had them first, most had them top 5. I just don't get it, and I don't think Rodgers is playing at this level where he can overcome not knowing the offense just based on pure talent, or you know what I mean? I just don't know what he hasn't. I mean, last year was his worst year statistically.
Well, he was injured last year, Joe.
Okay.
I mean,
I'll delete the article.
He was playing hurt. He got hurt early in the season, but he kind of hung in there. And I mean, it wasn't that first game he left and came off after halftime.
Yeah.
So I think he was kind of injured the whole season. Like you said, the line wasn't the best. I think he's healthier this year. He just had rust because he didn't throw a pass through the preseason. And I think he's going to be very good next week in Lambeau. So I'm kind of concerned about him. The Packers' defense, on the other hand, has definitely improved. They shut down the defending NFC North champs on their home field last Thursday night, and I think that's nothing that you can brush away. I'm a little concerned. I mean, they're going to be a good team. They got likely a better coaching staff. Aaron Rodgers is smiling ear to ear because they have a defense. So I think, I think I don't. You could be right that he's certainly not the same guy he used to. What is he, 34?
Yeah, he's not that old. I mean, by quarterback standards these days.
Right. By the same token, I was just going to say, you got Drew Brees and Tom Brady who are out there slinging it this weekend too. So what the heck? So I don't think he's the same guy. I think where they do have some weaknesses, their receiving core is not as great as it used to be. I mean, they've got Devontae Adams and Jimmy Graham caught a touchdown pass, so maybe he'll be part of the offense this year. They still don't have a running game much to speak of. Where I'm hopeful in next week's game is the fact that according to the people on the broadcast last Thursday night, the NFL is making an emphasis of calling holding penalties, and that includes on the Packers' offensive line, which for years have got away with murder in that regard. And they had, I think, 3 holdings on Thursday night, which was just a lot for them. So I'm hopeful that they will call it honestly on Sunday, and the Vikings, because the Vikings are, got after Matt Ryan, and they had supposedly an improved offensive line. I'm hoping they'll be able to get after him. I still think, if you can rattle Rodgers. He's had enough injuries that it gets in his head and he starts gets off his rhythm, makes mistakes. But he's still, I think, every bit as good a quarterback as he used to be.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I just feel like things are they've just been blah the last 4 years now. They've missed the playoffs the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And this is why earlier I said I was going to bring up power rankings. I linked to one of the CBS Sports power rankings where the general idea of the Packers being this elite team by default because they have Rodgers, I don't think is true.
I'll agree with that, Joe. I will agree with that.
And that was my point too. I mean, I do think that he's obviously good to great. I just don't know if he's that good. Tom Brady doesn't have a lot of good receivers to throw to either, but that's a really hard comparison. I do think that if we're going to play the Packers at home, I'm super glad we're doing it right now.
Yeah, me as well. Hopefully there's still a little more rust next week. They still aren't. They still have a new offense they're trying to figure out with Matt LaFleur. I mean, there's back and forth going between him and the coach that you talked about in past weeks. That's still something they got to figure out. I don't think it's as big a deal as we media members made it to be, but it's still something that duo has to smooth over because Rodgers' ego is as big as anybody's in the league, and he's got a new and young receiving core. He's just I like the premise of your article that the Vikings don't have anything to be afraid about going up there. I mean, the Packers have beat them once in the last 7 games. One time in the last 7 games, Packers have beaten the Vikings. Think about that. It doesn't seem like that, but and if Daniel Carlson makes a kickoff, it's 1 in 8. Or I mean, a field goal, it's 1 in 8 for crying out loud. So, no, they just if they go back in there fired up like they were, Anthony Barr might just get in and say hi to Aaron Rodgers.
I know. I was just thinking, and then he'll end up on Conan complaining. Yeah, the fear I have a little bit with this game is, Cousins last year, different offense, obviously, but he was. The 2 games was 70. He had a 73% completion rate and a 76% completion rate, and those were low throwing games. I mean, the first game he was 35 of 48. The second game 29 of 38. First game 425 yards, 4 touchdowns, an interception, and 118.8 rating. Second game 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, 129.5. Excuse me, but obviously things are different season to season. But Cousins seems to play well against the Packers. The fear that I have is that LaFleur is an acolyte of Gary Kubiak's, and he might have some insight into some of the wrinkles the Vikings are going to attempt on Sunday. There was a few quotes from him, not saying that much, but he was just saying that the Vikings do a lot of similar looks to what they do on offense, obviously, but a little bit different.
Shouldn't that work both ways, though?
Definitely. Yes, but it still concerns me a little bit.
Yep, that's a good point. I don't know. I'm excited about the Vikings going up there after the game they just played. I think they've got a heck of a lot of momentum. They made some changes to their team, and they bore fruit in week 1. And it's not like a lot of Zimmer's other week ones. Even last week when they beat San Francisco, I came away from that game going, not so great. And they kind of went, they went up there and played well in Lambeau, but they lost, and things went downhill quickly from there. And Zimmer lost a Monday night game out in San Francisco years back, and when San Francisco was terrible, and so I think they've got a lot of momentum coming out of that game. They made some mistakes, as you pointed out earlier, on defense with penalties, but generally it was a pretty clean game, and things couldn't have gone better for them against a team that people were regarding with playoff hopes. So, I'll agree with you wholeheartedly that putting the Packers in the top 5 after just this one game where they scored 1 touchdown and beat a Bears team that's, granted they were tough last year, but they've never been that good, they won the division, blah, blah, blah. But I think a lot of people have picked them to be down. So I think those Packer prognostications are a little bit little bit unwarranted at this point. 3 weeks down the road, we'll see if whoever wins this next game is got their season going in the right direction, and
Definitely.
it's going to be huge for them. There's no
it,
choice.
it is a really big game. I mean, if the Vikings can come out with a victory on the road, having the Raiders the week after, which are in complete disarray at this point, at home.
Completely. They played pretty well last night.
Yeah, well, yeah. I saw some of the fantasy stuff, but they were playing in Denver, right?
Yes.
What was the final score?
If
you remember.
It came down. It was like 26-19 or something like that.
Yeah. I suppose. I mean, I was gonna say division games are tough, but if they were awful, I don't know. Chucky is a good coach. I just think, man, that Antonio Brown stuff really strange and calculated, almost on some evil mastermind. Like I think a lot of people thought, that there was CTE involved or he was going crazy, but he wasn't. He was calculated, and he had hired social media people and experts to get him out of his contract. He did that on purpose, and it worked, and he ended up on the Patriots. It's almost like a movie or something. It's I don't know. I think the team handled it the way that they should have, but it's also a gigantic blow to that team.
Wow, that's collusion. If because the Patriots had looked at trading for him before he was traded out west to there, so maybe they were in cahoots. That's
the word. Belichick told Rosenhaus, the super agent, to stop talking about. He went on ESPN that day and talked about it, and a lot of people were wondering how did he end up on the Patriots that quickly after he was cut. It was like almost instantaneous. I mean, I had written an article or a topic in our message board like half an hour after I saw the news that he was released, which was maybe an hour after it had happened. And by the time I posted it and promoted it on social media, the first response was he's with the Patriots already, and it was like, what? Like, how does that happen? So I think a lot of people are thinking what you just said, and maybe it'll be hard to prove, and Belichick is an evil genius as well. It feels a lot like Darth Vader and the Emperor with his hoodies and everything.
I think Trump is going to hire him as his next NSC and
NSA chairman.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
He couldn't. He could find worse people. Was my point. So. What was your score prediction last week? Was it 23-21?
23-20. It's no blood. No blood. We both missed. I missed the. I got.
So it's a push, right?
Right. No blood.
Okay. Wow. That's actually. I'll take a tie. If anyone has followed this show, that's probably the best I've ever done. Especially to start the season. I'm just happy I'm not down 50 points and the season's already over. You hadn't published your preview yet?
Nope. Didn't want you to see it.
You're playing hardball.
I am. You took my score from last week. I was going to go 24-21, and you grabbed it. So I said, okay.
So I went first last week, and should I go first again, or do you want to go first?
You can.
Okay. This is actually very, very hard, and I've thought a lot about this. Just having such a strange outcome to the Sunday's game. And not knowing what to expect, but looking at how Cousins played last season, I know that it's a different defense. I know, but they kept their defensive coordinator, so there's some consistency there, just different players, a few rookies. But I do think that the Vikings offensive line is going to hold up pretty well against the Smiths. So having Cousins having had success, and the defense being on a high and seeing what I saw on Thursday night, I'm going to go with the Vikings victory 31-17.
Wow. Well, we'll get some change this week then, one way or the other. I've like I said, I kind of talked about it earlier. I think their Vikings are coming off very, very confident after this week. I think the Packers are going to be better than they showed last week. They're going to be a tougher opponent than they were last year for Minnesota. The Vikings will have to vary their offensive attack and not just rely on the run, because the Packers defense shut down the Bears rushing game pretty well last week. So I think the Vikings are going to have a balanced attack to beat them. But I think they will. I think they're riding high, and they're going to remember the fact that they lost with their kicker missing 3 field goals, 2 of them in overtime up there last. That's going to come rushing back to them, and they're going to be pissed off and want to beat them. So but I see it as a close game. I think that the Packers are a decent team as well. So I got 2017 Vikings.
Ooh.
So we'll see.
Might come down to a couple field goals. Yee! It'll be exciting. For those listening and watching, we will be live chatting the game as we do. You can do that on either Vikings Territory or PurplePTSD.com. Keep an eye out for our other podcasts. Load the Box should be recording later tonight, and the word on the street is Irv Smith Jr.'s dad. Irv Smith Sr. is going to be on that show doing an appearance, which should be interesting. And we might have some big news on the podcast front coming soon, which is actually really exciting and validating. So stay tuned to all the sites. You can find us everywhere. Bleacher Report, Spotify, iHeartRadio, whatever floats your boat. But we will be back early next week to talk about the Vikings-Packers game. Keep an eye out for my show, The Smoke Break. It'll be on all of our social media platforms on Sunday for the pregame, the halftime report, and the postgame reaction. But this has been Morning Joe's for the afternoon/early evening of the 10th of September. Thanks, everybody,